Police officers of Reddit, have you ever had an all units call? And if so, what happened? I was doing a ride along in college in a fairly small city in GA when we got an all available units call. The address came in, the lights and siren went on, and we were hauling ass at about 120 mph across town. I had no idea where we were headed until we got there. The only thing the officer said to me was, no matter what happens, stay in the fricking car. If you see anyone with a gun, call it out on the radio like this. Showed me, if any of us get shot, call it in and stay in the car. Then, he took a deep breath, calmly got out of the car, and took off at a sprint towards a 40-person melee in front of the only strip club in town. We were the first car there. Over the course of the next 30 seconds, officers arrived and kept coming until they outnumbered the people fighting. The officer I was riding with was completely on his own for a 10-second eternity and was able to rip about 10 people apart from fighting before backup arrived. It was the single bravest and most humbling thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. When it was all over, he got back in the car with 3 drunk and beaten up dudes in the back, turned to me and said, "So when you gonna sign up?" 25 years ago, smallish rural town. My dad is a beat cop on patrol. My cat brings in a live mouse and is playing with it in the kitchen, and my mom is deathly afraid of rodents. So she calls dispatch and tells them my dad needs to come home. Dispatch gets on the line and tells my dad to switch to a secured line. There's an emergency at home. My dad's driving home to take care of the issue when all of the cops, probably like 4 of my small town on patrol, come with sirens and lights blazing on my house because all they heard was there was an emergency at my dad's house. My mother was mortified. "Dang it, Martha, you can't keep doing this." Years ago, friend of mine was a dispatcher for the county he covered, sheriff, EMS and fire communications, and also worked with communicating with other agencies as well. From the state troopers, he got some sort of text communication, not a phone text as was before that was a thing, and it referred to an accident with injuries at the intersection of I-40 and Business 85. Something along the lines of collision I-40 bus 85 injuries involved. The way it was abbreviated and written made him misread it. Instead of an accident at 85 Business, he thought there was a bus collision on I-40, with 85 people injured. He dispatched every dang fire truck and ambulance the county had. They show up and it's a 2-car wreck with minor injuries. LOL, that is unfortunate for him but hilarious imagining the holy crap moment he would have had from reading it. Former cop here. The all units call was basically a riot at a large nightclub in a very rough area of the neighboring city. Once things were finally calmed down and the dozen or so people were taken away and my boss wanted us all back in our city, I was amazed at not only how many cops showed up but from where. Counties and towns I had never heard of before. I looked up a few at the end of shift and some came from an hour plus away. I'm shocked the fight went on long enough for them to drive an hour there. Fighting is freaking tiring. So, I interned at the local PD at a time when all stations received new radio devices. The new devices looked a bit like old cell phones and had a bright orange panic button on top. It was meant for situations where, for example, a single police officer was attacked and needed help. Pushing that button resulted in all communication on the standard channel 1 being turned to one-way communication only. So all units would listen to what's going on wherever the panic button was pressed. And an automatic all free units call. All other units had to switch to the much weaker channel 2 to communicate, but channel 2 only allowed one device to speak. So either dispatch or car 1 or car 2 etc. could talk, but not multiple people at the same time like on channel 1. To disable the panic mode, you had to push the bright orange button in a certain way. Think of holding it for 3 seconds followed by 4 quick pushes. It could not be done remotely. This happened in a rather large city where some police stations are closed at night, usually the ones in the suburbs where few calls come in. That night, an older PO closed down the remotest station in the suburbs and decided to shut off the radio devices. You guessed it, he pushed the panic button on top because he thought that's where the devices were to be turned on and off. Without realizing what he did, he locked the station and went home. Since it was the first day of using the new radio devices, quite a few officers were unsure how to turn to channel 2. Basically, all communication was blocked. Cue panic everywhere with frantic cell phone calls to dispatch. and dispatch trying to figure out who closed that station, and thus had one of the only keys to open it, so the panic mode could be disabled. This unintentional all units call turned into an actual no units can call, though quite a few units were busy trying to resolve the situation. Good intentions but horrendously poor execution on the radio maker's part. Former Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in a small tourist town was working on a regular mid-weekday shift when we received a dispatched call for a bomb threat in the industrial commercial sector of the town. We all went there, called in the bomb squad, the dogs, got people out of the area, and so on. We were doing roadside when we got another call that the local bank's silent alarm was turned on. Now, we are in Canada, in a tourist town. Things are usually relatively calm, but this was absolutely chaotic. We got the all-unit call. They call our neighboring detachment to help. We all split and head to the bank. We arrive. Around 20 some patrol cars all around. There to see all bank employees bounded and gagged. Smoke everywhere from smoke bombs. We realize very quickly that the bomb threat was the diversion. We immediately got a bolo out to get the 3 males, identified by the bank staff, including a former bank employee. We get the bolo out to CPIC, got words to airports and border crossings. We managed to catch 2/3 of the guys. The last one flew back to his home country, was in Canada on a student visa. We remained on high alert for days after this, looking for the third guy. Canadian authorities worked with their colleagues from the other guy's country to get him extradited almost a year later. In the end, as I recall, about $130,000 were missing and never recovered. For most of us, it was the first time we had a bomb threatened or a robbery. First time we were guarding an area, expecting to be shot at from an unknown location. The robbers were reported to have AK-47 type looking weapons. Holy frick, that sounds like a movie, or an episode of Flashpoint, because, you know, Canada. Usually about once a month or so, we're taught that if you need backup, if shoot's hitting the fan, call it in and worry about how many people come later. A unit was on patrol 2 weeks ago and some guy just started shooting at him. All the unit got out was 34th Saint. 1033 I'm taking fire. 1033 being the code for send the cavalry officer in need of assistance. It all ended fine. We caught a guy, no injuries, but you better believe every officer in our area dropped what they were doing and went. Another recent one, a mini riot broke out at a candle vigil for a murder victim. An officer stepped in alone, bad move, to stop the fight, and started getting his ass handed to him. All he said was Potomac, 1033, but it worked. We came in, dispersed the crowd, and got out. The potentially deadly version of the company-wide reply all. I remember listening to an episode of This American Life where an officer accidentally locked himself in the back of his car when he went to take a nap. He left his radio in the front, so he called dispatch and was like, "Don't make this a big thing. Just send one unit to me," and then dispatch proceeded to call out the code for officer down, so then he heard a bunch of cars put on their sirens and raced at him. I got run over by someone fleeing the scene of an incident that they weren't involved in. He just got scared and apparently had a gun on him. I was out of my car talking to the person who called and my partner was trying to stop the person who was really called on, so he didn't even see me get hit. No one knew I got hit or where I was because my radio went flying. Luckily there was a lot of witnesses who called 911 and found my radio. I confused the dispatcher because I was in so much shock that I came over radio taking like I normally do, but I was bleeding badly from my head and broke my leg. I didn't feel the pain for about 2 hours. So I had that call come out because of me. I'm also pretty sure a policy got made because of me too. We had an all units call to one of our own stabbed. Everyone went heck for leather to get there, to find one of our guys on the floor with a stab wound to the stomach. We searched everywhere for the suspects and anyone matching descriptions were arrested. So turns out the officer did it to himself. He'd heard you couldn't be fired from work if you were injured in the line of duty. He was under investigation for a minor issue, not anything involving the public, just breach of procedure. I don't think I've ever been so disgusted with a colleague in my life. All the other all units calls I've been to have been genuine and luckily my colleagues unhurt. I almost called one myself when someone pulled out a sawn-off shotgun at me. Luckily that panned out okay. Happens all the time. Officer S. In a fight. Possible subject with a gun. Major traffic accident. It's not anything like the movies. If it's a big enough incident, all your available units are going to be going. I work as a police communicator at a local university. Usually an all units call is a fire alarm at one of the buildings. However, most of the time it's a false alarm and someone just burnt the popcorn at the lounge. One morning at work we were evacuated from a rather large office building, 50 plus floors, in NYC. Fire alarms went off on 3 floors because someone burned their popcorn in the microwave. That person will never live it down. Obligatory, not a cop. But I once got a all unit called to my house. Backstory: my mom was dating a rimhead and everyone knew who he was and our address. I was around 15 and one night he went off the rails and was beating the crap out of my mom. I got involved just in time to see him swing at my sister, who was 7 at the time. I ran for the phone and called it in. I got as far as the address when he grabbed me by the neck and threw me. Well, the dispatcher heard my garbled yelp and called it in as a possible homicide in progress. That combined with his reputation sent every single cop in the surrounding jurisdictions came flying our way. By the end of it I think there was 20 plus police officers at our house. I ended up hitting him with my mom's cast iron skillet to keep him there just as the first officer showed up. He was super cool about it and pretended he didn't see a thing. It was a terrible night and my mom was mad at me for months. But man, you don't frick with my little sister. We have calls almost daily that kind of meet this requirement. We have patrol sectors, each with a 2-man cruiser and a 1-man cruiser. The 2-man cars handle the high priority calls and the 1-man cars handle the more mundane stuff. So when a call comes in like shots fired, both sector cars go and usually other sector cars start radioing and that they are also responding. I do remember one night at midnight, which is shift change, we had a 2-man unit that shot a guy who pulled out a gun on them. You could hear gunshots over the radio and the car calling for help. The dispatcher kinda stumbled a bit, then said everybody go, everybody go. Was a military police officer on a rather large base. I was getting off shift and being transported back to my barracks by the guys coming on shift so I could check in my weapon. Suddenly we got a call for all units to respond to a section of base housing. A military wife was having an affair with another soldier while her husband was on deployment. Supposedly the husband was due to return soon, so she tried to break it off with the other guy. He responded by stabbing her several times. My team leader and I searched the tree line with our weapons drawn. Cause he's armed and it's dark outside, you know. I actually passed the guy with my team leader a few yards behind me and suddenly he comes out saying, "You're looking for me." It scared the crap out of me. My team leader covered him while I went in for the handcuffing, making sure that I had my knee firmly planted in between his shoulder blades and thoroughly covering his upper torso into the muddy terrain. Not sure what happened after that. He was taken to a holding cell by another squad and I got to go home. Ended up getting transferred from that base a few months later, but I know the wife survived the wounds. Too many examples. London riots. Unit attacked with a machete. Large group fighting with knives. Building fires. So on and so forth. Happened to my dad when he was stationed overseas. There was an airshow disaster in Germany and he was already there, so he was one of the first to respond. He struggles from it still. Fireworks and barbecues remind him of the smell of burning flesh that day. You have been visited by a normal duck. He doesn't do much, but he'd like you to like the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.